we've come to really the featured portion of our program. We are going to be having a wonderful presentation from Mr. Tom Vander, and I'd like to read a little bit about Tom before we bring him up. Tom Vander is the author of Getting Smart, Smart Cities, and Smart Parents. He is CEO of Getting Smart, a learning design firm, and a partner at Learn Capital, an education venture fund. Tom advocates for innovations that customize and motivate learning and extend access. Previously, he served as the first executive director of education for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Tom served as a public school superintendent in Washington State and has extensive private sector experience. Tom is a board chair of Charter Board Partners, director for 4.0 Schools, Bloom Board, Digital Learning Institute, Ednovation, and Imagination Foundation, and serves on several other nonprofit boards. So if you'll all join me in offering a warm round of applause to our keynote speaker, Tom Vander.
Y'all have a lot of really good schools. That was fun. As a result, I want to start with my origin story. It was 17 years ago. I was sitting in Rick Perry's office, and Governor Perry had just come in from a luncheon, and he sat down and he said, "Tom, I just met with all these businesses, and they want to know what we can do to better prepare our kids for this new economy." And I said, "Well, this is like off the top of my head, why don't we start 36 STEM schools?" He goes, "That's great, let's do it. My people will talk to your people." So like literally overnight, with Robert Scott, who is the commissioner, we drafted an initiative called the Texas High School Project. And fortunately, you had I think you had about 3 schools at the time. Robert and I had no idea where all these schools were going to come from. We called the Dell Foundation, which had just recently been formed, and about a week later launched the Texas High School project with $10 million from the state and $10 million from Dell and $10 million from the Gates Foundation. And Senator, you and your team really took advantage of that and I think opened about 15 schools as a result of that. I'll tell you now, 17 years later, I worked with over 400 nonprofit organizations around this country. Very few of them actually did what they said they wanted to do. You may be the only one that did a lot more than you said you could do. And I am so proud of you and everybody here for what you guys have accomplished. And where are our friends from Educate Texas? Thank you for being here. So the Texas High School Project grew up and became Educate Texas. It's an extraordinary organization. Harmony is now part of the biggest and best STEM network in any state in the country. There's nobody that comes close to having accomplished what you have in terms of creating a great STEM network. So that's how we got to know each other. You have continued to grow and prosper since. Later in my talk, I'm going to talk about the great work that you did with the Race to the Top funds. And so this organization really has taken great advantage of important grant opportunities. So that's the good news. The downside is that we're living through a world that we don't really understand. I'm an engineer by original training. I love studying systems. And I'll have to tell you, when I read the newspaper, when I watch the news, I don't understand the world. It reminds me of the period between World War I and World War II when people were scratching their head wondering what was happening. So I want to start with a poem from Lewis McNeice, who talked about that period of time. He said, "Each of us has known mutations of the mind where the world jumped and rivers gushed from what had seemed to pool. For every static world that you or I impose on the real one must crack at times, and new patterns from new disorders open like a rose." I want to focus on this idea that you and I impose sort of a static model on the world. It's our mental model. It's how we understand what's happening. I remember sitting in thermodynamics class and learning about systems, and these systems were guided by an immutable set of rules. And like science, we develop a set of mental models, a set of if-then statements that explain to us how the world works. And when we see things like the Dallas shooting, when we see Baton Rouge, when we see trouble around the world in Paris, in Istanbul, in Syria, our mental model cracks because it doesn't seem to work anymore. And so today in this session and in the later one, we're going to talk both about mental models and our dispositions, our mindsets. Those two things sit on top of our knowledge and skill. And so developing knowledge and skill is really important, but the reason that you're so successful, the reason that you're so important as a network is that you don't just teach kids knowledge and skills, you give them a disposition and a set of mental models that help them understand the world. That's why I'm so excited about your personalized and project-based learning. We'll talk more about that.